Hi, everyone. I am Nicole Stiller, and I lead Visa Direct for domestic payments in the U.S. And I will let Nick introduce himself as well.
So my name is Nick Moisef. I lead the Fintech platform team at Remitly, and we're headquartered in Seattle with offices globally.
We have an interesting discussion here today. Hope you learned something. Hope you take something away. And we won't really have time for questions, but I do want to make sure that if you have questions after this, that you can come to the Visa booth. It's booth 229, and we'll be around there for a little bit after the session. So with that, let's get started.
That's good.
What is Remitly? Tell me about what you do.
Yeah, so Remitly is a digital financial services provider focused on cross-border money movement. Our vision is to transform the lives of immigrants and their families by providing the most trusted financial services on the planet. If you're anything like me, when I applied to Remitly, I knew nothing about what remittances were. I thought it was a super niche market. Western Union had just capitalized on it, and there wasn't a lot of opportunity. That's anything but the truth. It's a huge market, $600 billion in just the peer-to-peer remittances. Super fragmented, leading player has 15% market share, and there's just so much innovation going on in terms of payments, disbursements, and also just providing a better customer experience.
We're at a FinTech conference, and what is exciting about, I think, you being here is some FinTech needs to move money to solve a different problem, and you are in the business of moving money. Can you tell me a little bit more about the product and how it works?
Yeah, for sure. So to start, we're a digital first player. So 80% of our customers are sending money from 30 send countries to 170 receive countries. We allow the transfer of over 100 currencies. The other 20% are using our desktop platform or mobile web. I think that one of the biggest challenges that we have, or two of the biggest challenges, is money in and money out. And then as a part of that is making sure that there's little friction in that process right now. And so that's really what we're focused on, and particularly providing instant payments and disbursements.
So how does a user use your platform?
Yeah. So we have senders, like I mentioned, from 30 different send countries. They'll come onto the platform, enter payment details, enter recipient details, and essentially send money cross-border. A great example, which I can get to in a second, I guess I should say that about 70% of remittances are for just daily needs and necessities, and a subcategory of that is medical expenses. And that's a situation where it's particularly important that money is transferred instantly, there's an urgent need, and then also without error. So an example that I'll give, we had a customer named Ivan in the US sending money to his sister Anna in Ukraine, or trying to. Long story short, he hadn't heard from her in a couple weeks. When he finally did, she was actually in a refugee camp. This is shortly after the war broke out. And she needed money very quickly in order to pay for her daughter's medical expenses, and then also to pay for rent. And so Ivan actually saw an ad that we were running with Visa where we waived transaction fees to sending to Ukraine and then also some of the surrounding countries, downloaded the app, entered his Visa debit card, and then sent to Anna, his sister's debit card. We use the push-to-card solution that Visa offers.
It's so incredible to hear this idea of people needing money, right? I think we were talking before the session, and you said, like, the user actually started crying when they found out. Yeah, I can actually read the quote. Ivan left this on one of our App Store reviews, but he just said, "I easily created an account and was able to transfer money from my debit card to hers so that she could buy medicine and look for a place to rent for her and her son. She confirmed an immediate transfer and started to cry." And so I think there's many customers like that, and that's kind of the reason why I've stayed at Remitly for so long, is that it's just a really exciting space, but you have such a profound impact on customers' lives by being able to provide instant money movement without error. And Nick, you had shared with me before that you run several components of Remitly. Will you just share a little bit more about what you do there?
Yeah, sure. So I run the customer success, risk, and money movement team, which includes payments, disbursements, and also finance product, more specifically accounting, treasury, and reconciliation.
So you're busy, and you've been building you said to 100 countries, 100 and...
Yeah, so 30 send countries and then 170 receive countries.
That is a lot of payments. And when you have payments, you talked about kind of two different parts of it, both the funding the transaction as well as the recipients receiving the transaction. Can you talk a little bit more about the options for payments and disbursements?
Yeah, definitely. So I think first and foremost, one of our core leadership principles is customer centricity. So really working backwards from customers. On the payments side, we started focusing on sending from the United States to Philippines 12 years ago, and then like I mentioned, we've expanded. So a lot of our customers, actually 92% of our customers, or 92% of transactions are funded with cards. And so we've really focused on providing the ability for customers to pay with their credit card. Doing so has allowed us to expand in new markets. We recently launched the UAE a couple months ago, and we go first with offering card payments. And then on the disbursement side, we offer 4 different disbursement types. So dispersing to bank accounts, mobile wallets, cash pickup locations, and actually home delivery, where like literally someone jumps on a scooter and goes and delivers cash to your house. It's a huge network, so we offer a service to over 4 billion bank accounts, 1 billion mobile wallet provider accounts, 465,000 cash pickup locations, and 7 different home delivery providers. So there's a lot of diversity there. I think what's key for us is finding partners that are able to help on both the funding and the disbursement side. So for example, we use Visa, or we partner with Visa to provide payment optionality on the card side, and then also use their push to card or push to account product on the disbursement side. And by doing that with one integration, or essentially like a chunk of engineering product work, we're able to expand on that. At least on the receive side, we were able to use push to card to expand to over 60 countries, and then we're planning to add another 40 in the next 2 or 3 months. It's relatively easy. And then with that, we're able to determine where there's demand. So say on the send side, we'll offer cards first, then we do customer surveys, customer research, and then we'll add what we call alternate payment methods. So for example, in the UK, we've added open banking. In Belgium, bank contact. In Netherlands, Ideal. And so really what you're seeing is in the funnel, ultimately what we're working towards is customers have the ability to pay with the method that they choose, and then also the recipient has the ability to receive funds with the method that they choose.
What a diverse set of choices and countries. It really, you said 60 send markets?
Yeah, 30 send markets.
30 send markets.
Soon, yeah.
See, I know you're busy. 30 send markets, and in every one of those markets, you started with card, it sounds like?
Yeah, in every one we've started with card. And again, it's just based on customer demand. The card is the most prevalent. We launched, and then we really kind of iterate from there. There's 1 or 2 exceptions. As an example, in Japan, majority of customers pay with bank deposit, and we plan to launch that card and bank deposit. That's the one exception.
And on the receive side, and when you talked, I'll go back to the funding side. Because you have consumer choice and adding it, you are continuously looking at adding more options, but you still see the usage with card at the top, or do you see different pattern?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're constantly running experiments, right? I think we're very conscious of the paradox of choice in the funnel too. So we will present what the preferred payment method when we look at the market. Really where we see customer demand, like what payment profile are customers using predominantly. Majority of the cases, we default to what we call express transaction, which means that the customer pays with their debit or credit card. And that actually leads to the best customer experience. Customers are most familiar with pulling out their card or using their card details. And so that's what we really have tried to optimize around.
And we were talking about, you just mentioned the need for faster payments, both for medical expenses and, to help with I think her name was Anna in Ukraine. Faster payments sometimes means faster fraud. And in the UK, we saw that push payment fraud actually surpassed all of card fraud last year. Can you talk a little bit about how Remitly is managing fraud?
Yeah, it's definitely been an evolution. When we started early days, we looked for partners, SIF Science, for example, or some of these other partners that we partner with to help with models and rules to prevent fraud. We've since matured a lot and have our own in-house built systems, and then also partner. I'll give an example of a use case that actually happened about a month ago. So we send from the United States to Brazil. We had a group of fraudsters that basically came onto the platform. About 2,000 accounts were created, legitimate identities, but they had stolen card information, like pretty basic use case. But what we do is we challenge the customer to provide a selfie plus their ID. So we were able to verify their identity, but the card details didn't match. So AVS came back as a not a match. That's a common use case for our customers. They're immigrants, they move around a lot. And so we didn't weight that mismatch as heavily as we should have, and then also overweighted on the identity match. And so ultimately had a pretty bad fraud situation where we lost a lot of money. Since then, we're partnering with Visa to provide more name details around the card that we can match to the customer account and ultimately reduce fraud. And they've been a great partner in helping us understand other signals and what we can do to improve our systems and really start to calibrate around the the outcomes that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time as Visa investing in fraud solutions. Money movement instantly is first the hard part, but now it's been solved. So now it's how do we optimize for fraud, and whether it's account verification or address verification, as you mentioned, or new products like our account name inquiry that's happening. It's with partners like you, we can work together to create both the use cases that we're seeing and how do we solve them together. Going back into the disbursement side of your transaction, can you talk about the need for speed and the options that you looked at there as well?
Yeah. So we again, if we go back to when Remitly started, we were focused on developing markets. So primarily cash based. I send money to you in the Philippines. You go to a physical location and pick up cash. That has definitely changed over time as we see more investment in infrastructure, PIX in Brazil, UPI in India. More customers are moving to digital disbursement methods. We previously had around 60 to 70% of our disbursements in cash. That's now closer to 40% of more customers have moved online or to preferred mobile wallets or bank accounts or cards. And so what we've done, what we're really focused on is instant disbursements. About 52% of our transactions are instant now, meaning that they're delivered in less than 20 seconds. We are really trying to optimize that customer experience and work with partners that can provide instant delivery. That's not easy. I know it sounds easy, and like the experience that we have domestically creates the expectation that it's instant, but that's not the case. So that's one of our number one problems right now is creating peace of mind with our customers, and the way that you do that is to provide instant delivery.
So how many people in the room already offer faster payments? I can't tell there we go. A few of you. And how many of you are looking at offering them? Yeah. It's interesting if you're going to get started with faster payments or real-time payments, on both sides of the transaction. Where do you get started?
Yeah. I mean, like I mentioned, working backwards from customers is particularly important and understanding what their use cases are. I think with faster payments, there's a lot of talk around, a lot of companies will claim faster payments and then it's like T+1 or T+2, and that's not necessarily going to meet customer expectations. And even T+0 matters. That could be up to 23 hours in some cases when your customer really wants it in less than a minute. And so first and foremost is understanding customers. Second is looking at the partner's tech stack or their capabilities. I think a lot of the differentiation comes from handling exceptions and understanding how the partner will help you handle those exceptions is particularly important. Example would be we've seen a lot of success in conversion around validating account information upon entry as opposed to post-submit. And so finding partners that are able to do that is particularly important. The third is really around reliability. I'll give you an example. Last weekend, we had about a 48-hour downtime with open banking with the partner that we chose. And so that's just not acceptable, and it's a trust buster for customers. So finding partners with high amount of reliability and availability is important. The second to last is security is a big factor, and how are we securing PII and payment information is also important. And then lastly is the cost piece. But I think like we've learned some of the hard way that don't lead with cost, lead with customers, because oftentimes you'll see lower costs, but the providers aren't necessarily meeting the bar.
It's so interesting because we hear the same thing about cost and, oh, it's costly and how do we do that? But I think your framework helped understand that there's a transaction cost, but there's also all these other costs associated with payments, whether it's, you mentioned fraud or security breakdowns, or you can't serve customer needs, and so now they might go to a different platform. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and then we're really looking at the lifetime value of the customer through the entire journey. And we found that in many cases, it makes more sense to pay more for an instant transaction or pay more for basically a better customer experience, and it ultimately nets out positive instead of just looking at some of the transaction costs.
When you think about how fintech is solving unmet needs, how is Remitly like focusing on it? We've talked quite a bit before. You had a really nice focus on customer, and you just mentioned it now. Can you talk a little bit about your customers' unmet needs and what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. So I think if we go back to our vision statement, is to be the most trusted financial services provider on the planet. There's two pieces of that. One is trust, and then the second is planet or being global. From a trust perspective, if you think about like kind of the conversion funnel, one of the greatest challenges we have is customers don't know about what Remitly is. How do we build that trust with customers? And one way we've done that is to partner with large, well-known brands, Visa being one of them, to create that halo effect and bring customers into the funnel. Once they're in the funnel, it's really creating a delightful experience. And like I said before, one of the differentiators is speed. And so for us, creating a faster transaction or being able to deliver money instantly is particularly important. Again, we're still on a journey there. About 52% of our transactions are instant. And then I think the third is inevitably there's going to be something that goes wrong. And so how, if the customer's there for a very long time, ideally this doesn't happen, but like it most likely there'll be an error at some point. And so how do you handle those edge cases? And a key piece to that is having visibility in the transaction lifecycle so that you can create, self-service abilities for the customer to correct or amend things. And then also message customers. Messaging is a key part for us in creating that trust or maintaining that trust. And then as a part of being global, I mentioned, I think there's providers out there that give you or give companies the ability to expand relatively quickly. With Visa, we've allowed us, Remitly has been able to expand very quickly on the send and the receive side with one partnership and essentially one integration with some nuances. And that allows us to focus on what's going to be a differentiator for our customers. And I think we're now at the point where how can we focus on those unique things and partner where we can augment our capabilities.
So you talked about customer centricity, customer trust. Can you talk a little bit more about the user experience? Fintech is amazing, and Remitly's just been incredible at optimizing the user experience. And you mentioned top of funnel conversion. So everybody here wants to grow customers. How do you think about the UX and how does it relate to meeting what your customers need?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges we have right now is this is a super complex space and there's a lot of options. And so how do you provide enough optionality for customers? Again, like the combination of the payment method, the combination of, for us, remittance companies make money in two ways, FX spread and fees. And so how do you communicate essentially what is a clear offering or a value prop or package to customers without confusing them? So we're really focused on packaging right now. And then the second thing is, it goes back to the messaging. A lot of the challenges we have right now is helping customers understand why their payment method doesn't succeed or why their disbursement doesn't succeed. And you're limited in some cases by the error codes essentially that you get from providers, both on the send and the receive side. On the receive side, we have 120 direct partnerships. And so the discrepancy from, say, Land Bank in the Philippines, which is honestly one of the oldest banks in the Philippines, and some more of the tech forward companies M-Pesa, for example, in Kenya, like the detailed error codes that you get back that you can then decipher and provide messaging to the customer is a focus for us. Again, so focus on those instant transactions, but then when they don't succeed, how do we provide clear messaging? That's predicated on the ability that the partner has in order to communicate that, basically how the customer might be able to rectify it.
And if you, because you deal with so many diverse endpoints, whether it's individuals from different countries or different preferences for wallets versus accounts versus cards, how do you see form factor as a differentiator?
Yeah, I think one thing that we've noticed that was a learning early on as we send to some of these Latin America markets is that there's different preferences that customers have for entering primarily recipient details. So in Mexico, for example, the common use case is if I'm going to send money to Nicole, I'll ask for Nicole's 16-digit card number and not the bank account number. And so oftentimes we'll see customers literally like WhatsApp the picture of the front of their card with the 16-digit card number, and then me as a sender will type that in. And so what we've done in the funnel is basically give customers optionality of how they're going to address basically sending money to the recipient. And so it's anything from phone number to 16-digit card number to bank account number. And so I think, one other concept that you're seeing more and more is a global aliasing scheme. You see that with UPI in India, for example, where it's like Nick at State Bank of India or something. And so that's tied to my bank account or tied to my payment profile on the receive side. And so we're really trying to optimize and increase conversion at the recipient account entry step. And one of those ways is form factor with the 16-digit card number that you get with push to card.
Yeah, we see the same on, particularly when users are prompt, it's how do I get the easiest? And whether it's adding a routing and account number, that's a lot of friction. My bank doesn't let me copy and paste the routing and account number from the mobile app. And so I cannot remember the order of those digits, and it's very frustrating. And then you say, okay, then a 16-digit card number is good. But then it's a phone number or an email, or Visa just launched a Visa Pay Name so that it creates a receive-only account, just so that we can ultimately keep the customer safe, but also reduce friction in the form factor to help people move through the flow faster.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So we have a few minutes left. If you had advice for somebody around getting started, there are lots of different networks to choose from who are offering faster payments. TCH, FedNow is coming, Visa Direct on push to card or pull from card in the United States. Which rail would you recommend they start with?
Yeah, again, so for our customers, card is particularly important, and that's the one that we would start with. I think there's some other learnings that we've had as well. Like there's if you go back to customer needs, it's very localized. In the sense that, so let's say we start with cards. We use a number of different providers. So for example, we'll use Stripe in the United States or North America and Checkout in Europe, just given the success that each of those providers has in those different regions, very localized. Similarly in Australia, same challenges. And so I think generally finding a partner that can provide global coverage, and then there's nuances of how to supplement that with the right partnerships. I think the other factor that I touched on briefly from a fraud perspective is it's particularly important to work with a partner or company that's able to provide details about the transactions that are on the platform. So whether that's real-time monitoring or prevention tools, being able to get the raw data and feed that into models or rules is particularly important as well.
So know your customers and find a partner that has value-added services, whether it's exception handling or risk and fraud, so that you can really optimize how that is presented to your customers based on your use case?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes from the partner provider giving more control to the business that allows you to, like I said, build a unique experience that differentiates. And
closing thought, what are you most excited about for payments in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I'm super excited about the investment and innovation that's happening in some of the local what I'll call like payment networks. I think in the United States, super familiar with FedNow. That's unfortunately not accessible for cross-border money movement, but you're seeing a lot of the same thing globally. So Pix, like I mentioned, in Brazil, there's just basically so much innovation and investment happening locally. And so the question is like, how do all of these instant money movement networks locally become connected internationally, and what does that mean? And I think the other thing that's at play too is you have really large organizations, Tencent, Alibaba, Visa, MasterCard, like you're seeing so much differentiation regionally, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, especially as it relates to the merchant network and then the implications on consumers.
Nick, thank you so much for having us today. It's been great.
Thanks, Cole. Thank you.
Thank you.